So first off, I mean, in comedy, everything is so personal that we really do need some kind of objective way to look at our comedy. So that's where par value comes in. Par value is not as important as a lot of people make it, but it still is a useful tool. Basically, par value means positive audience response. So if someone yells, "You suck," then that doesn't count for your par value. So par value, basically, so we took the 5-minute set that I did at Comedy Works, and then say, okay, out of that, so that was basically 300 seconds. So of those 300 seconds, I want to know, basically how well I did in an objective way, how I can look back on it and say, okay, a year ago, this was my record, now this is my record, basically. It's a way of keeping us pushing forward. So let's say I was on stage for 300 seconds. That was a 5-minute set. Of those 300 seconds, let's say 100 seconds, just to make it easy, 100 seconds of it was laughter. So that means that for 200 seconds while I was on stage, 2/3 of the time, I was either talking or silent. And then for 100 seconds of the time, the audience was in some way showing their appreciation, usually through laughing, but it also can be an applause break. So basically what we do at that point is we say, okay, so we have 100 seconds divided by 300 seconds is 1/3, or 33% par value. So, and we can do this for any number of our sets, or any length of them. So this was for a 5-minute set. I keep a 1-minute, my 1-minute record for par value. I think it's like 68 or 69%. But basically, I try to break that record sometimes. If I try to do my closer, I'm going to say, okay, for the last minute, I want to see if I can get, I want to see if I can get 70% laughter throughout the last minute. So that's a way of keeping me working on both small bits that are my closer, keeps me working on 5-minute bits that are more really are bits. And then also, I mean, you can look at a 45-minute bit and say, okay, over the entire time that I was on stage, how well did I do? So there's just different ways of using numbers in order to help ourselves be more objective in our comedy. But the trap here is to think that numbers count for everything. They do not. There's different qualities of laughter, for sure. I mean, just because this is 33% doesn't mean that you did better than someone who did 30%. And that's kind of, seems counterintuitive, but we got to remember that this is just how much positive audience response there was. This is not how likely they are to remember you as a comedian. There could be a comedian that gets 25% laughter over the same time, but they're going to do it in a way that's more unique, more engaging to an audience, and an audience is going to remember that guy, not the person that was like, oh, this guy had 5% more laughter, yeah, we're his fan. So don't think the numbers are the only thing that matter, but at the same point, they are a useful tool in order to get us to better ourselves as comedians. Does that make sense?
And so you do it by reviewing the tape after.
Exactly. So basically what I'll do is I'll set up my little flip camera and I will just go through my entire set afterwards. Usually, you guys have noticed by now that it's very hard to go through your own set if you've tried to watch. If you've tried to watch your own comedy, it's very difficult. It never gets any easier at all. I mean, it's just, you always think, oh, I really wish I didn't do this with my hand or something. You're never happy with it at all. But one thing I like to do to get around that is when I get home, I pop it in my computer, I hit play, and then I go do something else inside my room. So my comedy is playing on the computer, and then I'll just keep hitting play over and over again while I'm cleaning my room or doing whatever. And eventually it gets a little bit easier to hear that as you're going, because you're not really putting yourself in there quite yet. So the more times you hear yourself, the more likely you are to sit down and actually watch yourself perform. So after hearing it a couple of times, then I'll sit down and I'll just slowly go through my entire material. I'll say, okay, so here's 0 seconds, and it was a 300-second bit. Let's just keep the same number. So 300-second bit, and I'll say, okay, there was laughter here, which is at 0:10, and then it lasted until 0:08, or 08. So basically, negative 2 seconds. Good math.
You can write a little bigger if you need to.
Yeah, so okay, so basically that means that this laugh here was 2 seconds long. And I will just go through everything. So right here, they start to laugh. I hit pause, and then I write down the number, hit play, wait until it gets to them stopping laughing, hit pause again, write down that number, and then I say, okay, that was a 2-second laugh right there. And then I go through the entire set little by little, and I say, okay, so here was my best joke right here. This one got 9 seconds of laughter. And then I go, okay, this was my worst joke here. This was just like maybe a half a second or 1 second. Basically like 2 people chuckle or whatever. Like, I still haven't figured out when only like one person chuckles, like how to really be like, oh, that was a 3-second laugh. Yeah, from one guy. But yeah, so basically, I mean, it's not a science at all, but it's a very useful tool. So basically, I'll go through all of this and I'll say, okay, for my opener, so the first minute, I like to concentrate on the first minute and say, did I, really engage the audience in the first minute? How much laughter did I get in that very first minute? Because that's going to tell them what's going to happen for the rest of the show. So I want that first minute to be really jam-packed. Also, I like my closer. I want to make sure that that's strong as well. So instead of saying, okay, over this entire 5-minute period, I want, a 33% par value. Instead of doing that, I'll say, okay, well, I want 33% par for here, but on my intro, I want it to be 45. On my exit, I want it to be 55. And that just keeps giving me slightly different goals that I can really work on. Because right here, I mean, with my closer, it would be very easy for me to have quit by now. Just being, because it's tight already. I already showed you guys how it's evolved over the last just several months. So it would be very easy to quit, but I like to keep pushing myself on these numbers. I mean, I love to go back and I like to say, okay, well that was 55, and then try to figure out a way to get that to 56. And then once you've done that, try to get to 57. And it's just kind of this perpetual goal that's really fun to keep working on.